Hello, puppies and kittens. Welcome to another episode of Blasphemers Bible. And today we are on Book of Job, chapter 9.
Job
Mm-hmm.
9.
And do we have any opening comments on that?
Number nine, number nine, number
We've already
nine.
made that joke. Skip it.
Yes.
Well, I apparently missed quite a bit of victim blaming, so I hope you gave him hell for that for me.
Yeah. So this is chapters 9 and 10 are going to be Job's response to Bildad.
Yes,
Which-
Bildad the Shuhite.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
got a lot of really cool stuff coming up in 9. A lot
Yeah.
of really cool stuff.
Yeah, I
And
have 7
I
pages
hit-
of commentary.
I
on
hit
this.
on a few of them in the previous chapter, the one before that. I talked a little bit about it, but I'm going to return to some of it, obviously. And a lot of this stuff I actually mentioned in some of the work that I've done previously. So I'm definitely excited to talk about this.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It'll be good.
Shall we dive into it then?
Please.
Okay. Let's see. Then Job replied, "Indeed, I know that this is true, but how can mere mortals prove their innocence before God? Though they wished to dispute with him, they could not answer him. One time out of 1,000. His wisdom is profound. His power is vast. Who has resisted him and come out unscathed? He moves mountains without their knowing it. And he overturns them in his anger. He shakes the earth from its place and makes its pillars tremble. He speaks to the sun, and it does not shine. He seals off the light of the stars. He alone stretches out the heavens. He treads on waves of the sea. He is the maker of the Bear and Orion, the Pleiades, and the constellations of the south. He performs wonders that cannot be fathomed, miracles that cannot be counted. When he passes me, I cannot see him. When he goes by, I cannot perceive him. If he snatches away, who can stop him? Who can say to him, 'What are you doing?' God does not restrain his anger, even the cohorts of Rahab cowering at his feet. How then can I dispute with him? How can I find words to argue with him? Though I were innocent, I could not answer him. I could only plead with my judge for mercy. Even if I summoned him and he responded, I do not believe he would give me a hearing. He would crush me with a storm and multiply my wounds for no reason. He would not let me catch my breath, but would overwhelm me with misery. If it is a matter of strength, he is mighty. And if it is a matter of justice, who can challenge him? Even if I were innocent, my mouth would condemn me. If I were blameless, it would pronounce me guilty. Although I am blameless, I have no concern for myself. I despise my own life. It is all the same. That is why I say, he destroys both the blameless and the wicked. When a scourge brings sudden death, he mocks the despair of the innocent. When a land falls into the hands of the wicked, he blindfolds its judges. If it is not he, then who is it? My days are swifter than a runner. They fly away without a glimpse of joy. They skim past like boats of papyrus, like eagles swooping down on their prey. If I say, I will forget my complaint, I will change my expression and smile, I still dread all my sufferings, for I know you will not hold me innocent, since I am already found guilty. Why should I struggle in vain? Even if I washed myself with soap and my hands were with cleansing powder, you would plunge me into a slime pit, so that even my clothes would detest me. He is not a mere mortal like me, that I might answer him, that we might confront each other in court. If only there were someone to meditate between us, someone to bring us together, someone to remove God's rod from me, so that his terror would frighten me no more. Then I would speak up without fear of him. But as it now stands with me, I cannot. This guy just needs a good attorney, and I'd be happy to volunteer.
Amen.
All right.
Ugh.
I am so excited. I am so excited here. So a lot of this stuff I actually, especially like in the early part of chapter 9 here, I like at least through, let's say, uh, yeah, at least through verse 12 for sure. A lot of this stuff I actually covered in my video on biblical cosmology. And obviously, I'm sure
Which
you
is
can
another good
see
one.
why.
Everybody should watch that.
Yes.
Peter, can you put the link in the chat? Just people save it in another tab.
Yeah, it's quite long, but I think it is pretty good, which is not something I'm used to hearing. However, I do want to point out that this this chapter has a lot of allusions to the
Mhm.
stuff that I talk about in that. Now, obviously, the most important one would be verse 6. Shakes the earth out of its place and its pillars tremble. That is because it
No,
was
I do.
very what?
Sorry, no, continue. Sorry.
That is because it was very much on pillars. It was on massive pillars. Uh,
Yeah.
Now the thing is, there have been a lot of different ideas about what these pillars are. I think one of the sorry, Tomer, getting ahead of you here. One of the Christian commentators says that the pillars are actually the church or the apostles,
Yeah,
stuff like
yeah,
Of
of
that.
course.
course. Of
Yeah.
course.
So because of course they do. Uh, but no, we're talking about actual pillars. We've seen this in First Samuel 2. It was that hymn or that song, right? Um, we're also gonna see it in Psalms, Isaiah, Joel. It's in a whole bunch of places with the earth being on pillars,
Yeah.
and I am not going to waste your time with stuff that I've already talked about in my video. So if you want to learn more about biblical cosmology, just go there. But there is a lot that goes into it, and pillars was one of the main things, one of the main motifs in ancient Near Eastern
Yeah.
cosmogeography.
I, I should I should also know that Kara thought that the pillars were the 7 Canaanite people.
Yes, sounds about
Of
right.
course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Another one, right? So even with verse 7, um, yeah, he commands the sun, and it does not rise. He seals up the stars. So there have been a few ways to understand this, but I'm sure you guys remember when we covered the Dear Allah text, right? Those are the ones with
Mm.
Balaam.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, where he was obviously not a worshiper of Yahweh. He was a worshiper of a whole pantheon. So in that text, we do see clouds sealing off the heavens. Um, the sealing off of the stars, and by some is thought to be clouds. Um, it's been variously understood as the mount of the sun or the temple of the sun. So like a possible eclipse. Uh, so there have been different ways to understand this verse. In verse 8, this is probably one of the bigger ones for me because we have the stretching out of the heavens and the trampling of the waves on the sea. Uh, so the stretching out of the heavens, this pops up in Isaiah a whole bunch, and it's very common in late text. This is only
Yes.
a phrase that is late.
Yes. Yes.
The there are, but it's always referring to God's creation of the heavens, and I'll get to it later in the book too. But the stretching out motif comes from when Marduk kills Tiamat, and he splits her body in half, and her upper body, he stretches out her upper body to become the heavens.
Yeah.
That is the kind of motif that this is calling back to, the stretching out
Isn't
of
there
the
a parallel between that and Mithras throwing his cloak over the domicile of the firmament, and that he has the stars sewn into his cloak?
I don't know, but there are definitely some similarities there because the
Yeah.
stars were thought to be drawn into the sky, like someone's like poking them or something.
Mhm.
Inscribed. That's the word that's used for them often in the
What I
ancient Near
love
East.
about
They
these
were
is
inscribed.
that these stories are so unbelievable at any level of technology that you know that these are just. It's like when they tell stories about Pecos Bill carving the Rio Grande
Mhm.
and Paul Bunyan and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
When those stories were originally made, they weren't meant to be taken seriously. It's really disturbing that people now would argue for the historical truth of Pecos Bill.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and that's about the level you get with your Kentovans trying to find, a way that the pillars of the earth is something other than, at best figurative, archaic language. But it's it's also, I don't know. For me, Job always sticks somewhat on the theological portion because it's the problem of evil. And it really highlights the difference between the henotheism and then monotheism, pseudo monotheism of Judaism, where because in a truly polytheistic society like your Greek gods or whatever, um, they weren't morally good in that way. They weren't morally evil, but they weren't perfect or moral icons. They were just more powerful. And
With this God, that was another point I wanted to make earlier when we were reading through this, is that this God is obviously not morally good. Even if you're
no,
innocent, he'll still condemn you.
yeah.
Well, we've seen that enough times, right? Why do people worship this God?
Well, and that's the thing is that it does confront the narrative and the problematic narrative that if God is good and bad things happen to you, then you must have deserved them. So obviously it's your fault, which is absolutely a thing that has happened and been a part of the narrative um, for a lot of people, and people have had to fight against that kind of victim blaming. And I mean, I'm glad it's opposed here, but at the same time, the problem of good and evil and God doesn't go away. You just have to sort of accept, you have to be beaten down enough to accept it and feel like you are doing the right thing for some reason. And, if they grind you down enough, you probably will.
And I think you've also missed the point about in verse 5, the mountains, him who
Oh,
moves
yeah,
the
moving
mountains
mountains,
without their knowing it.
Yeah.
Or without
that
the
is,
mountains knowing it.
That the mountains know. Although some say that it's like the people of the mountains who know.
Yeah, yeah. It would
Who
still
don't
be the
know.
mountains. There's a lot of that personification stuff in Job. We get to
Yeah,
stars
yeah.
singing and stuff like that. So the where was I? Right. With verse 8, right? So I've already talked about the stretching out of the heavens. There's also the trampling on the waves of the sea. Now this has been understood differently. So I think the word there actually means heights.
Yeah,
Um,
Bamate.
yeah, the heights of the sea.
Yeah.
And the thing is, so that's been understood as waves, but going back to even people like oh my god, how am I forgetting his name? He wrote it was Frank Moore Cross. That's who it was. It was Frank Moore Cross in his book Canaanite Myths and Hebrew Epic. He postulated that um that there's a cognate, there's an Ugaritic cognate that means back for yeah, sorry, what was the Hebrew there for waves?
Bamate.
Bamate, yeah.
Bama.
So there's a Bama. Okay, so there's the Ugaritic cognate that means back. So you'd be trampling on, if this goes back to a sea monster myth or something like that, then this would uh it'll be understood as like walking on the back of the sea. And if we're talking
Yeah.
about the sea as like this cosmic entity, then that would make sense. This is uh the destruction of the sea. Or the
Yeah,
taming of the sea, right? So yeah, tread on the backs of the seas. For example, we can cross-reference Deuteronomy 33:19 for that. Marduk tramples over Tiamat, then uses Hafer to form the sky, but also understanding backs. Yeah, there's the understanding of backs as heights or waves. The old Gregorian actually has walking on the sea, like on dry ground. So there is.
That
There's quite a
does,
lot that goes into this. There's
You
Yeah.
a
said
lot.
old. Wait. You said old Gregorian?
Yes.
Did you mean old Greek?
No.
or is it something else?
It's a no.
No,
It's
this
not
is
Greek.
Gregorian
that-
something else.
Oh,
Is that
no,
the
it's just
Latin translation?
Are you thinking like Gregorian chants, Tomer?
no, I just forgot what
This-
old Gregorian is.
Yeah.
Is it not like a specific manuscript?
Well, I'm
Well-
thinking it's from like a few witnesses is my guess, but I don't know which specific manuscript this is. I did not write down which specific
Oh.
manuscript this was.
This actually reminded me of Francesca Stavropoulos, the book of hers, God and Anatomy, I read, that it talked about the feet and how they would have the footprints of the god going into the temple, but that the feet were something very visceral. And people in those, for many centuries, millennia, people wore at most like very thin sandals. They could feel the earth. They were really touching, grounded to the earth all the time. And so there was a sense of like, it was a very visceral image to walk over something. And they would talk about, claiming things and it's very king of the hill, walking over things, trampling on the backs of your foes. However much that would ever actually happen physically, the image is the important thing, to stand above something, to dominate it by being able to walk on its back or what have you.
This is an image that's all throughout the ancient Near East, especially in Egyptian
yeah.
artwork. I think even on the Narmer palette, if I'm remembering properly, you have the is it Narmer palette? No, it's not. Yeah, it is. But there's a Narmer palette, and then there's some other artwork as well that shows kings stepping on foes, and that of course symbolizes their defeat. So we kind of have the same thing going on here, but yeah, there's a lot that goes into these into just those few verses. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, and I mean, it would have been a very familiar image of power over something, of either having defeated something in battle or being able to. And these are not armies, these are natural forces, the sea, the sky, great incomprehensible powers to the average person just, herding goats in the middle of buttfuck nowhere.
Yeah. Oh, they were very, very cosmic forces, right? We can put it that way. Maybe it would be wrong to think of them as gods in this context, but it certainly has some
Gods or monsters.
right. Yeah.
I mean, Tiamat's body makes the sky. The Leviathan is a great, sea serpent. The serpent at the end of the world that Thor fights. The Eerdmans. There's powers that are unintelligent but viscerally powerful, that are sometimes depicted not as people but as vast and powerful creatures.
And also take note of here verse 13 as well. Yeah, God will not turn back his anger. The helpers of Rahab bowed beneath him. So of course we talked about Rahab, I think, being another name for Yam, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's of course once we get to Job 26, we're gonna see it again. So I guess I'll leave it at that for all of my studies. But there's certainly a lot of really cool stuff in Job 9.
Tomer, is this
Yes.
Rashi? Do we have Rashi on Job, or is it pseudo Rashi?
Yes, we do. Yeah, it is Rashi.
Okay. I was wondering.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a few interesting additions that I wouldn't normally place with Rashi, but that's why I thought maybe it was pseudo Rashi.
Yeah, I mean,
Like
it's not uncommon to see additions to Rashi in his commentary by his disciples, so it's not.
Okay, maybe. Yeah, so for example, like with Rahab, he says, he identifies that as kind of like this guardian angel of Egypt, or the celestial host that came to aid the Egyptians or whatever. But he also says about the spreading out the heavens. He says, kind of like implying that we know that the angels weren't created until the second day, because
Mm.
this verse says, he was alone. He alone did it. Because if the angels were created on the first day, people would be like, "Oh, God created the angels, and then this angel created the northern sky, and this angel created the southern sky, or whatever."
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
Let
by
there be
saying
matter,
like,
let there be gravity, let there be everything on pages 37 through 85 inclusive. Yeah. And let there be light.
Yeah. Michael stretched from the north, Gabriel the south. Yeah.
yeah,
That's Rashi for you.
Mm.
Okay, so I'll start the commentary. So I'll start with verse 5 because I didn't really want to say anything about 2 through 4 because give me a break. He moves mountains without their knowing it. Some traditionalists were troubled with the personification of the mountains, and so took the mountains to refer to the people who lived on the mountains, according to Gersonides and Kimchi, or that the people do not know that the mountains were there, according to Rashi and Titrani. Likewise, Hakham writes that yad'u is a transitive verb without a subject, and is usually intransitively here to mean, and is used here intransitively to mean it is not known where the mountains have gone. He notes another interpretation. The removal was executed so quickly that the mountains did not notice that God had overturned them in his wrath. This interpretation is favored by Hartley, but Seow notes that we're dealing here with poetry, so one should not be too literalistic. He notes that Peshitta reads, he does not know, taking the vav in yada'u, taking the vav in yada'u with asher as a conjunction, but the rest of the versions followed him as radic text. He notes that others took yada to mean to be still, according to Thomas, or to sweat, according to Dahoud and Michel, but writes that these are unnecessary. Habel writes that the mountains, like the rest of nature, remain ignorant of what God is doing and why. Other suggestions include Targum, which reads, him who removes kings who are strong like mountains without their knowing it, and Tur-Sinai renders, those who have seen them disappear do not know where they are.
I think it's an odd thing to be upset at the personification of the mountains, because there's so much personification or, attribution of at least the possibility of intent to nature all throughout this. And yeah, it's very poetic. I wouldn't have thought anyone thought it was meant to be taken literally, but...
I was wondering, the opinion that says it's about the people on the mountain, is this related to like the story of... So when Lot is living in Sodom and he wants to, he and his family escape, and then the wife turns into salt. They kind of were like, can we just go to like this town over?
Zohar, yeah, the little town nearby.
Yeah, and it was spared. So apparently it was supposed to be destroyed, but then it was spared. So is there like an idea where God moved the city without the people in living there knowing, or something like that?
I don't know.
I mean, maybe there is like in the Midrash. Let me see.
Because Rashi says something about he moved them away. He moved the mountains. He moved them away when he overturned Sodom. Is that related to that town? I can't remember.
Wait.
Maybe.
Oh, sorry. I think I found something in Genesis.
Just for the record, as someone who lives around mountains, if they move, we fucking notice.
Oh, so this is, I don't know if that's related, but this is from Genesis Rabbah 49:6, and it reads, Rabbi Yirmiyah ben Elazar said, the main period of tranquility of Sodom was only 52 years, 25 years of which the Holy One, blessed be he, caused the mountains to thunder over them and brought quakes upon them, so that they would repent. But they did not do so. That is what is written, he who moves mountains and they do not know, in Job 9:5, and ultimately who overturns them in his wrath.
I keep beating you. Why don't you love me?
Yeah. So there could have been like some side connection here, I guess.
Okay, maybe.
Yeah, the beatings will continue until morale improves.
Did somebody say beatings?
Tamer, I am not flying to the other side of the world to hit you with a ruler.
Nah, I wouldn't like it.
Yes, you would.
No, I wouldn't. Okay. I'm not masochistic. Okay, on verse 7, several commentators... Sorry, I think I'm in 6. Yeah. Verse 6. Commentators note that the pillars, in Hebrew amudim, of the earth here are conceived of as supporting pillars beneath it, as we see in Psalms 75:4, which is 3, and 1 Samuel 2:8, which uses matzok. Habel notes that according to Israelite cosmology, the earth was believed to rest on solid pillars for its foundations. Each phenomena of the created world had its assigned place, in Hebrew makom, see also 28:1, 6, and 12, in the cosmic order of things. Clines notes that a similar cosmology is found in Seneca, Questions Naturales 620. Seow notes that, based on Psalm 75:4, which is 3, the steady pillars are also metaphorical for the reliability of moral order. Thus, this line alludes to mountain quaking, according to Kimchi, a metaphor for the shaking of the moral foundations of the cosmos.
Moral foundations of the cosmos. What a crock of shit.
I mean, that's how it was believed, right? I don't know.
I know. I'm just, the idea that the cosmos has moral foundations is a rather ridiculous argument for Christianity that I heard many times. Well, an argument for the existence of God. And it's...
I mean, it's interesting that they go with the visualization of pillars, like something that comes out of the ground and stands up and maybe holds something above it, as opposed to just like the foundations of the earth.
Yeah, it seems to be holding the earth up on something. I mean, maybe it's supposed to be turtles all the way down. What do I know? But
that's another thing that throws me in this whole book. I mean, there's so many things here, and we're going to get to them. It's going to be a few chapters in, but the absurdities are so extreme in this particular book that I fail to understand how anybody could take this literally.
Well, and I was working at a church, and they were it just before I deconverted, and this was one of the, like, it didn't have an effect on my intellectual deconstruction, but it kind of just annoyed me. They were one of those very, we can only put hymns in the hymnal if we can agree with them theologically. And they were starting, and the choir director started this new song, hymn, that was basically just quotes from Job. And it was all about the storehouses of the snow and all the rest of that, and the, rooms of fog. And I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, what are we, 10? And he's like, no, it's because it's, it's Job. I'm like, yeah, I know it's Job. But this is freaking childish. The Pleiades do not have influences on us. Grow the fuck up.
And we haven't even gotten near the worst of it yet.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, we haven't got to the verse with the Pleiades in it yet.
Yeah.
Well, there was a mention of the Pleiades, but not the sweet influences of the.
And how do they conclude that the universe is moral when God is constantly fucking with people like this, especially in this book where we have somebody just openly admitting?
No, they just assume it. So then they have to rationalize it.
No, that's basically the history of theology, right? But it's true. There's an assumption that the universe is moral because we would like it to be fair, which is not a bad desire in and of itself, but yeah.
I mean, there is this idea of, like, in Jewish thought, there is like the world rests on 3 pillars or whatever it is. I can't remember what they are.
It's like,
ideological
like 3 morals, pillars, right? Like the law,
maybe it's like Torah, Tzedakah, and like the Torah, charity, and doing good deeds or something like that. I don't remember what it was. I mean, and Islam has also has 5 pillars, which are more like 5 things you're supposed to do. I think it also includes charity as one of them, but it's also Hajj and.
I've actually always wondered if the because I've had Muslims tell me that they still believe that the, mountains are pins to hold the earth in place to stop earthquakes, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, guys, okay, stop it. But I'm wondering if that had anything to do with the pillars or foundations, if that was a part of the same sort of vague ideological history. Sorry, I'm helping my mom make a Christmas gift.
Oh, okay. I got it wrong. Charity isn't one of them. It's Torah, Avodah, and Gimilot Chasadim. Yes, which is
Chasadim?
divine service and acts of kindness. So not charity,
Okay,
acts of
so-
kindness. Yeah.
I had a Muslim bring up the thing about the mountains being paperweights to hold down the map of the earth, and he started saying how the way that this works is that the mountains have roots and they pin the lithosphere down. And I said, no, you have a completely wrong understanding of isostasy. The mountains float on it, and the lithosphere still rotates beneath them. They don't stop shit.
I heard, it. Oh my god, I
Yeah,
was
the Bible is more
arguing
accurate.
with this Muslim guy about the shape of the Earth. Now to be clear, he was not saying it was flat, but because the Quran says that it's shaped like an egg, he was like, well, obviously, like, you take like a flat Earth map, project it onto an egg, and then there's more land that we haven't discovered. So not exactly flat Earth, but because he needs it to be right, he comes up with some crazy shit. But so many of the arguments that can be used against the flat Earth also work against this. Like like the way stars rotate around the like the northern and southern stars, right? And how, like, depending on which hemisphere you're in, it's the sky is rotating relative to you in a different direction. That only works on our current model, and not on any other ones. So
I mean, they should be saying, like,
it's
they love to claim that, like, the Quran, like, knew things before science discovered it, even though
right,
things
yeah.
like the shape of the Earth they knew way before the Quran was written.
Even
But, like,
though people already knew by that point, they already
Yes.
knew.
Yeah,
exactly. But
yeah,
you-
I've learned something in my interactions with Muslims that I had already learned in my interactions with Christians, but it just confirmed it to me. If you learn about any topic, any scientific topic, any ideological topic, any form of philosophy, if you learn about it from a theologian, or no, from an apologist specifically, no, you didn't.
yeah.
You don't know shit about that topic, and what you think you know is all wrong. Always, 100% of the time. If an apologist explained it to you, you do not understand it. Go to someone else.
And you can make claims and be wrong, and you can make claims and be right, and it could be a coincidence. And, like, there's one that I like to bring up, which is, like, in the Talmud, there are some rabbis talking about, like, the kosher rules and whatever, and they're like, if you can see scales on the fish, so if you're, like, in the market and you see some fish for sale and it's cut into pieces, but if there are scales, then you know it's kosher. And they make this proclamation, like, all fish that have scales also have fins, but not all fish that have scales, but not the other way around. And it's like, how can they make such a absolute comment, like, you know, that there will never ever be found a fish that has scales and no fins? And it's like, well, maybe it just made sense to them, and because of the way, you know, from what they had observed until that point. And yes, to this day, there is no fish that don't have fins and do have scales. But it's just
They're saying it's impossible to find a fish that has fins but no scales.
the other way. That has
The other way,
scales
that
and
Has
no
has
fins.
scales
scales but no
fins.
fins.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like, if you see scales, you know it's kosher. You don't have to worry. You don't have to know what species it is and to have, like, to know that it has fins. You can assume it. And so it's like Jewish law that based
So
on
are
this
they good eating
assumption.
eels?
No, because they don't have scales, like proper scales.
Okay.
They have rules about what type of scales are considered kosher scales and what are not.
Okay.
Yeah, sharks are not kosher.
Sharks have scales?
Yeah, but they're different type of scales. I don't know. I know something about
They're
how
not
I
like
don't know
fish
exactly
scales. They're a different kind of. It's more like a.
I mean, technically, they don't have scales. They have denticles, right? They're made from like a different material as well. I think.
Are you telling me sharks are not kosher?
No, sharks are not kosher.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
I went into a fish market once and they had a blue shark in the counter, and they weren't selling it. It was the decoration, but that was the thing I wanted. I wanted the blue shark, and so they sold it to me for something stupid cheap, like $4. $4.
Damn.
And so I got 18 steaks out of that,
Oh,
and they were
wow.
good. But the more fun thing was walking into the house and seeing my 2-year-old son light up when he sees that I'm bringing in a full ass shark, and that this was dinner.
Several dinners by the look of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, on verse 7, several commentators take the reference to commanding the sun, called Cheresir, not to shine, and the stars to seal up, in Hebrew yachtom, to be their obfuscation by, quote, eclipses, clouds, sandstorms, or preternatural darkness, end quote, according to Clines. Seow notes that this is reminiscent of the scene of cosmic reversals in the plaster inscription from Deir Allah, where the heavens are apparently sealed off by clouds so that there will be darkness. Hartley suggested that the sun is being darkened by the thick column of smoke from a volcano. Rashi suggested that God closes a partition so that they do not shine, with Hakham explaining that most stars have times when they are not visible.
So he pulled the curtain.
Yeah.
Okay.
As one would.
So does God have Venetian blinds, or are they like old school tapestries? Is it a twist or a pull or?
No, it's metal. You know, it's because it's rakia, right? It's like bending like. Okay, on 8, the idea of God stretching out the heavens is frequently attested in late texts, like Isaiah 40:22, 42:5, Jeremiah 10:12, 51:15, Zechariah 12:1, and Psalms 104:2. Clines, however, notes that the phraseology of verse 8a was well known in hymnic language, and is probably not a late concept displacing that of the fixed firmament. Habel writes that this action belongs to a tradition according to which he creates a vast celestial tent, where he appears in theophanic splendor. The word bama in Bamate Yam could be understood to mean heights, and thus refers to the heights of the sea, according to Kimchi, i.e. the waves of the sea. Compare Vulgate, he walks upon the waves of the sea. Seow writes that, considering the mythological allusions in the book to God's combat with sea monsters, it seems likely that the allusion is to the divine warrior's triumphal stance. Compare Saadia, over the carcass of the cosmic sea monster. He notes that a representation of the divine warriors treading sea is evident in Canaanite iconography, attested in a limestone relief from Ugarit showing the storm god Baal walking over the waters. On verse 9, the verse describes either 3 or 4 constellations. Xil is generally taken to be Orion, as we see in Septuagint, Vulgate, Targum. Septuagint, Vulgate. Targum and Peshitta render the giant, which is the Akkadian and Arabic term for Orion. Clines notes that Xil in Hebrew means full, and so the Hebrew myth concerning this constellation may have been of, quote, a giant who, confining foolishly in his strength and defying the Almighty, was, as a punishment for his arrogance, bound forever in the sky, end quote, according to Driver. Chima is generally identified as Pleiades. Habel notes that Dahud compared it with Kamatu, appearing in a list of Sumerian deities with their Canaanite equivalents. The word may derive from the root Chaf Vav Mem, to accumulate, which is appropriate for Pleiades. Chadrei Teman, literally the chambers of the south, could refer to a constellation, or a star, or a group of stars in the southern sky, such as the Southern Cross, Sirius, or Argo, according to Hartley. Hakham suggested that these are constellations that can be seen fully only by people who live in the southern regions, whereas to the eyes of those who live in the north, they are hidden in chambers. Thus, Job presents the creation of these constellations as an example of the enormous wisdom of God. The term could also refer to chambers where wind, snow, and hail are stored, as seen in 37.9 and 38.22, according to PK and Pope. The term ash is more difficult. Is it ash? Ash. Yeah. Septuagint identified it with Pleiades and Vulgate with Arcturus. Targum renders Great Bear. Habel notes that in 3832, Ash has 3 sons, thus supporting the rendering bear, her sons presumably being the 3 stars at its tail, according to Gordis. Seow notes that scholars offer 2 possible etymologies. One assumes a relation to Arabic to Arabic ayut, which refers to lion. Thus, Ash refers to Leo, its cubs, quote-unquote, i.e. the 4 stars of Virgo that the Arabs characterize as dogs barking after the lion, or the, quote, star clusters that lie under and behind it, end quote, according to Halpern. Another links Hebrew Aish with Arabic Gait, which means rain, a proper name for a star associated with rainfall and fertility. Thus, Aish would be Aldebaran, I guess, Aldebaran. A star that together with Aldebaran, okay. A star that together with Hades is associated with rain and fertility.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like, if you translate it
Hades
as a major, the bear, Orion, or Pleiades, you could say maybe that they're constellations, but Pleiades isn't really a constellation. It's more just a few stars near each other.
Yeah, I mean it's a cluster of stars.
Asterism. But yeah, I mean, what is a constellation depends on the culture and the time period. So
true. But I believe the Pleiades was used to test scouts in many different cultures because it was a cluster of stars close to each other, and how many stars you could see in that cluster was a good indication of your distant sight.
Yeah. I think it was like, it's very common because we're not used to it, but it was like seeing Pleiades is pretty easy if you don't have light pollution.
Yeah. But how many of them you would see? Like if you see 2 or 3 or 5, there's a pretty big difference in the precision.
Yeah, there's a whole thing about how like, everyone knows that Pleiades has 7 stars, but you can't see 7 without a telescope or something.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's like, yeah, but with a telescope you can see that there's more than 7. So
maybe
whatever.
you can't.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, on 11 and 12, Habel comments, quote, Job now relates the mystery of El's alien ways to his own life. Not only is El powerful, aggressive, and disruptive, he is also elusive and invisible. Job's image of El as a figure who glides past, in Hebrew chalaf, compare verse 11, is an ironic allusion to the eerie wind that glided over Eliphaz's face in his visionary experience of an anonymous messenger, as we see in 4, 15, and 16. Job, however, can neither see, re'i, the form, compare 4:16, nor discern, ben, the presence of his God. Both verbs imply more than a physical observation of the visible. They also imply the capacity to comprehend, as we see in 13:1 and 42:5, and know in verse 25 and 14:21. El's elusive character prevents Job from confronting him in person and challenging his modus operandi as ruler of earth. Compare 11:10 and 23:13. On verse 13, even the cohorts of Rahab cowered at his feet. Rahab is elsewhere tested in the Bible as a sea monster, as we see in 26:12, Isaiah 51:9, Psalms 89:11, which is 10, and Sirach 43:25, which, like Leviathan and Tanin, was thought to inhabit the depths of the sea. Habel notes that Rahab's helpers appear to be the equivalent of the brood of cohorts assisting Tiamat in the Enuma Elish. He notes that a similar array of the sea monster's allies are defeated by the goddess Anath in the Baal myth. Clines notes that the myth of a conflict of Yahweh and the sea monster is never recounted in the Old Testament, but the number of allusions to it makes it certain that it formed a part of the Hebrew literature. He writes that there is nothing in the Old Testament to suggest that the battle was a stage in or precondition for creation, but obviously it was regarded as an event of ancient or rather primordial times. Rashi took Rahab to refer to Egypt based on Isaiah 37, quote, "Therefore I called Egypt Rahab, haughtiness," end quote. Those who helped Egypt are the heavenly army who tried to help Egypt during the Exodus. Hakham explains that what happened at the time of the creation took place again at the time of the Exodus from Egypt and the giving of the Torah, as seen in Isaiah 51:9, Psalms 87:4, and 89:11. Other traditionals take Ahav to refer to the government people who are full of pride, according to Ibn Ezra, or to those who strike terror who were gathered by the multitude, according to Targum.
I also want to note real quick that I think I kind of covered this at some point, at least to some degree. So when it comes to Egypt's association with it, if we look at like the Song of the Sea, for example, Carol Cluse argues that there is a lot of callbacks to that kind of chaos comp myth. And just to stress the point that you already made, that I mentioned the other week, that this battle does not have to be creative, but in many mythologies it often is. But then sometimes it's just not. So there is nothing, of course, that links it to the creation here, but it is certainly something that was in their, in their cultural milieu. It was something that they still recognized. So it's, yeah, there's quite a lot of interesting allusions to that myth, and you can kind of track its development that way too, which I find very interesting.
Absolutely, I can see why. I mean, and remember, there are primordial myths about the actual creation of the universe, but there's also myths about how the gods came to power. To go back to the Greeks, like earlier, they overthrew the Titans. There's a sense of there's a primordial chaos and order, and the gods rising out of this and taking power. There's different tones to it in different areas and different imagery that reoccurs. But yeah, this is very much very familiar for that part of the world, part of the imagery that made up their
I really, really do recommend Miller's study. The book is called "The Dragon, the Mountain, and the Nations."
Ooh,
that's
that
the
one
name of
sounds
the book,
fun.
and it's very good.
Somebody in the chat asked about this. This is my wife's reticulated python, Princess Buttercup.
Princess Buttercup! Oh my god!
Arn, Does
that make you Fezzik?
What's that? No.
You're carrying her. Does that make you Fezzik?
Okay.
Arn, I have seen you and Lalandra name snakes like, the names of a variety of gods and demons and angels and all that shit.
Yeah, I know.
And now you're giving me this?
Yeah, I know. My wife was not happy with me having a retic, but after living with him for a couple of years, she decided that Jormungandr was really freaking cool. So she decided she wanted one of her own. So she bought this one for herself and wanted to give it a really friendly name so that it wouldn't kill her when it got big.
I love Princess Buttercup.
Yeah, she is really pretty. But anyway, back to the show.
Yeah, I also do. I do see someone in chat that I want to mention here. So Ferdhausen is in chat, and he left a comment. Or I guess technically earlier today for me, or I guess last night, on the final episode of Atheist Sunday School, saying, "After 26 months, I'm finally done." So, guy watched through all of Atheist Sunday School. Good for you.
Damn.
Outstanding.
Okay, on 14 and 15, Hartley comments, quote, "Given the fact of God's superior power and wisdom, Job ponders how he could answer God in court, especially under cross-examination. There would be no way for him to match words with God. This fear grows out of his recent meditation on God's sovereign power. In these questions, Job reiterates his apprehensions in verse 3. Even though he knows himself to be in the right, tzedek, he also knows that he could not defend himself before God. Usually, one who is innocent has little to fear from a just judicial process, but Job fears the wise and the mighty God. To my opponent at law, I would plead for mercy. The only action he could take would be to petition God for mercy. Compare 8:5. These lines foreshadow the direction the drama will take. Job will press harder and harder for a legal resolution to his unjust suffering. But when God does answer him, he will be silent except to beseech God for mercy. Before God himself, he will abandon his legal complaint.
This is so frustrating. I mean, it's kind of funny. Why do they insist that God is just? It's like, if you're rich and powerful enough, people will tell you that you are wise and a good judge of character and just. And they're just blowing smoke up your ass. I mean, it's one of the worst things about potentially having power is just nobody is honest with you. And you never get to be a better person.
Tomer's getting his instrument out for everyone.
Oh.
Wait, I think I've done it incorrectly, and I should do like. Oh,
Is it Jeebus?
I should do. No, I should do like. Yeah, that's way cooler. Like.
That's a different instrument, yes.
Yeah. It's a ruler, nothing.
It still plays
very
music.
shady. Yeah. Okay, on 17, he would crush me in a storm. Hebrew for storm is sa'ara. The word is rendered as storm in Septuagint, Symmachus, and Vulgate, and is favored by traditionals and most modern commentators. However, since the word has a shin instead of a samech, Targum and Peshitta read, for a hair. This meaning is favored by Clines, who argues that it is somewhat inappropriate to speak of a tempest crushing someone. He writes, quote, for a mere trifle, a hair, or indeed for nothing at all, chinam, gratuitously, God crushes him and rains blows, and according to NEB, on him, end quote. Seow, however, notes that the variant form of sa'ara with sin is attested in Nahum 1:3, and in Eliphaz's first speech in 4:15, and so he retains this reading.
Got a comment from Ferthausen, who offers $10 and says, I can finally say that I'm done with Lawrence's ASS.
Let's face it. No one's ever truly done with my ass.
I guess. Okay. On 20, Clines notes that verse 20 still has in mind the lawsuit setting. Even if Job could bring God into a lawsuit, the outcome would be hopeless. Earlier, Job predicts that either he would be unable to answer God's questions, verses 14 and 15, or that God would ignore his cross-examination, in verse 16. Now, Job imagines that in God's presence, his own words would betray him and make him appear guilty despite his innocence. He notes that Rowley remarked that Job is afraid he would be intimidated and confused by God's presence, and will argue against himself. Dom has subtly remarked that my own mark, quote-unquote, condemns Job, since he can do nothing but implore God as if he were a sinner and cannot maintain his right. On 22 through 24, Hartley comments, quote, gaining some composure, Job registers a sweeping complaint against God. He complains that when God devastates the world with a plague, he unjustly makes an end of the blameless, Tam, and the wicked, Rasha. That is, when God suddenly sends a scourge in the world, like a flood, he mocks at the despair of the innocent, in Hebrew, Nekiyim. Scourge, in Hebrew, Shot, means whip or plague, and applies to a devastating judgment that brings widespread death. Compare Isaiah 10:26 and 28:15 through 18. He mocks, quote-unquote, means that he gladly lets them vainly cry out for help as a part of their suffering. He lets them struggle hopelessly until they die. This complaint challenges Bildad's conclusion that God carefully distinguishes among people and would never despise the upright. 8:20. It also counters Eliphaz's assertion that God offers protection during difficult or troubled times, as we see in 5:19 through 22. Eliphaz also uses the word shot in 5:21 and posited that the righteous are able to laugh at destruction, 5:22, and compare 22:19 through 20, rather than being mocked by it. But Job directly challenges his friend's position as well as the mercy and justice of God.
Good, because I have observed neither mercy nor justice from God.
On 27 through 29, Seow comments, quote, "In view of this urgency, Job reviews various options. First, he thought simply to drop his plaint, quote-unquote, a term for legitimate expression of grief, and simply change his countenance and substitute for it a facade of brightness, a mask of happiness, in verse 27. Yet Job dreads all his pain, meaning perhaps his inner sickness, pains of the heart, see Genesis 6:6, or the spirit, see Isaiah 54:6 and 63:10, or simply the unrelenting divine imposition of yet more suffering. Job fears the consequences on his compromised self, when his external appearance masks his inner despair. In any case, that compromise would not help, for God would still not treat him as innocent. God would not remove affliction from him, the affliction that seems to one and all a punishment for offenses. Job would still be condemned, and all his efforts would have been futile."
Because God is an asshole. That's always the answer.
On 30 to 31, Clines comments, quote, "The washing of hands was a well-known ritual means of purification, a symbolic declaration of innocence. Compare Deuteronomy 21:6, Psalms 26:6, 73:13, where also it is in vain, in Hebrew, rek. In prophetic theology, it is recognized that some sins are too serious to be purged by purely ritual means. Hence, in Jeremiah 2:22, Israel's guilt will still be apparent even if it washes itself with lye, in Hebrew, borit. And in Isaiah 1:18 and Psalms 51:4 and 9, which is 2 and 7, influenced by prophetic theology. Only God can perform adequate cleansing from sin. Job envisages a similar washing to that described in Jeremiah 2:22, but the verb he uses is more emphatic, hata chatzati, the hitpa'el probably being iterative, according to Anderson.
It says hitrachatzti.
Hitrachatzti, sorry. For some reason, like, the commentary of Clines just, like, made it two words. So I read,
Oh, okay.
I don't know. I'm lazy. Hitrachatzti. Oh, that's funny. I know Hebrew, trust me. 32 and 33. Seow writes that the term mochiach, usually translated to arbiter, means, quote, someone who can bring about what is right by decision, argumentation, instruction, or censor, end quote. While Job wishes that there may be a mochiach, this is impossible, since there is no higher legal or moral authority over God. He notes that although God is often the subject of the verb yachach, to effect right, as we see in Genesis 31:42, 1 Chronicles 12:18, and Psalms 58 and 21, nowhere outside of Job there is a suggestion that God may be subjected to a mochiach's authority.
I mean, yeah, it's the power, the absolute power of the ancient kings. You could only go to the king to hope for justice, not because the king was just, but because he was the only one who had the power to do anything. And if you were lucky, you might get what you needed. Maybe. Possibly. Probably not.
And finally, 34 and 35. Hartley notes that the rod is a staff, like the staff used by a shepherd to protect and guide his sheep. This staff may be used for comfort for the believer, as we see in Psalms 23:4, but also for punishment, as we see in 21:9, Lamentations 3:1, Isaiah 10:5, and Proverbs 22:8. He argues that Job is dismayed by the thought of God's rod in this way, and knows that his dismay is so strong that it would prevent him from defending himself with conviction. If God's rod is removed, then Job would speak with clarity and power. And Targum reads, "Let him remove his plague away from me."
Interesting. Any idea why the the tet is big.
Oh, wait, is
in
it?
the word?
Yeah.
Shift as well.
Actually, I don't know. Usually, like they have this elongated text and like letters, and there is no real explanation as to why they are elongated, and it's just like I don't know.
Is it elongated or
It's enlarged. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
it is enlarged. But I
scaled?
don't.
That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah, I don't really see though any
Oh, okay.
explanation as to why. Just
Mhm.
that. Oh yes, I forgot it completely. Talk amongst yourselves or something. I just need to find my capo.
Yeah.
I got a friend here.
I found out recently
Aw.
this word. This word.
What is the little
Shevet.
princess's name?
His name is Flair. After, actually, I named him after Charlotte Flair because Ric Flair is an asshole. But Flair it is.
Fair. Oh, are you a good little baby, Flair? Why did he stop scratching you? Oh, that's dishonorable. Oh, you're so cute.
Yeah, this
I want a
guy
cat.
loves
Just
attention.
learn. I found out recently that the word that is used in this verse, shevet, which can mean a rod or a tribe, they're not exactly sure which came first. If it's like a tribe as an offshoot, like a branch of something, so it's used as the same word as a rod, or maybe the word for rod comes from tribe because like a tribal leader might hold a rod, but they're not sure.
Yeah, I
in the modern
remember in the
Hebrew-
story of Tamar, the Judah had his rod as a symbol of his identity and authority.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So I found out recently that I can't remember exactly when, but in like the Hebrew university or something in Israel, like they came to them and like there's this new concept in science, cloning. Can you think of a word? Can we create a new Hebrew word to carry that meaning? Because like clon, to turn that into to like use Hebrew punctuation with it or
So
whatever. I can't remember exactly. It's
pretty.
difficult. Like it doesn't really fit in the system of like Semitic roots. So he's like, can you think of like, can we create a new word for it? And it actually uses that same root. I can't remember what the word is. Thomas, what's the word for clone in Hebrew? Is it like shibut?
Shibut.
Yeah, shibut. Yeah, and it's the idea of like branching off and like creating an army of clones. A brotherhood, a tribe. It's interesting how they thought of that.
Okay, so I hope the shit post will work. Yeah.
No one knows what it's like.
Shut the fuck
to be
up.
bad man.
Okay, stop it, both of you.
Guess who's talking about Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Guess who's talking about Jesus? It's ancient Christians again.
All right.
See, I picked a band that Arn would know.
It was very kind of you.
Okay, yes, we are in 9, so let's move there. Yes, so Chrysostom and Ishodat said that Job is able to recognize the power of God and to foreshadow, in his prophetic words, the mystery of salvation.
Sure, Jan.
Foreshadow the mystery. How do you foreshadow a mystery?
You say something cryptic that could mean anything or any number of things, and then you have someone come along afterwards and read great wisdom into your words.
Yeah.
Okay. And by the way,
yes.
this one, since everybody would, since I got the reaction out of Princess Buttercup, this one's name is Cora L.
Oh Oh, really? So you don't have any kryptonite around her, I'm guessing.
Well, no, it's Cora L because she looks like a
Because
coral snake.
coral. Yes.
Yeah, just a whole bunch bigger. Coral
Mm.
snakes don't usually get this big.
Fair enough.
All right.
Yeah. So there.
Um,
So wait. Ishodat wanted. So I'm sorry. I'm quoting from Ishodat. So he said here the author is probably speaking about what happened in Egypt for 3 days, allusion to the Blake of the Darkness, Exodus 10:21, or about what happens sometimes to the stars that become hidden. Perhaps he's alluding to what occurred at the beginning. God kept the light close to him as though it was in a bag. The interpreter, i.e., Theodore of Mepuswestia, Ishodat is referring to a lost work by Theodore, says the author does not maintain that the things he mentioned actually happened, but that if God desires it, they will certainly occur.
Interesting.
Also, Gregory said that in his image of the heavens, Job describes the light of grace that spreads the unfailing justice of God, and in his image of the sea, he describes the bitterness and constantly changing nature of the material world.
Using this book as a support for God's justice when it is literally just an accounting of how God is endlessly unjust and doesn't give a fuck.
Also, this section, i.e. 14 through 35 verses of Job's speech, appears to be quite controversial in different respects, especially because it may suggest the idea that Job seriously doubts God's justice. The fathers tried to solve these evident difficulties mainly through a moral interpretation of Job's words. As a consequence, Job's assertions become an instrument of moral instruction to the Christian, according to Gregory, Chrysostom, Hesychius, and Didymus. At the same time, Job's words appear to contain a prophetic message that hints at the sacrifice of Christ, according to Ephraim and Julian, of Eklund. Finally, Job's despair demonstrates the frailty of human nature, so that his doubts are psychologically interpreted as a consequence of his excessive and unbearable sufferings, according to Gregory, Chrysostom, and Philip.
Do I have to remind you of the one truth? And the crop that symbolizes the one truth, that God is bullshit.
Yes, so Ephraim said that these words mean two different things in verse 9:17. That either that Job had not sinned, even though he was, nevertheless undergoing a punishment, or that Christ, if he were guilty of sin, would have suffered resolutely the temptation of blameless passions.
Oh, good. They're going to put their kinky passions on Jesus. That always ends well.
Yeah, and I think it was Julian who said something. Yeah, let's see. Julian says, the earth is given into the hand of the wicked. With regard to the context of the passage, Job seems to state that his earthly part, that is his body, is given to torments and vexations. The permission to afflict it is granted to the impious. Therefore, it certainly happens that those who see cannot express a fair judgment on the merits of the one who is afflicted. Passing to the prophetic aspect, that which vindicates the merits of the person, Job appears to wander from the context of the debate and to speak of future mysteries. The passion of the Lord is predicted. Job's friends could not recognize this because the earthly vileness of Job's external appearance in his eternal dignity. Job's friends could not recognize this because the earthly vileness of Job's external appearance is his internal dignity. Okay. Is it violence or real?
It's interesting the difference between the more skeptical scholars, I know what the word is, not skeptical,
Violence.
more critical scholars versus these Christian commentators.
Yeah.
It hurts. This stupid hurts.
Somebody made a comment in the chat about having extra kitties. I personally think that we shouldn't have more kittens than we have tortillas.
What?
You need to make burritos.
Jamie Wells 777 says, offers $10 and says, "What a great day to be alive and in our group of godless heathens and Tomer's musical talents."
Absolutely. You know, I don't even think I blasphemed on Sunday. I felt very bad about it. I was visiting family. I got distracted. So I'm glad to get a little extra in midweek because we wouldn't want anyone thinking that I wasn't doing my part to sin.
You know what I like about blasphemy? It's a victimless crime.
It's true.
All right, so Lilith,
Yes.
who's reading the next chapter?
I'll take the hint. Yes. 10. What a wonderful place for me to start.
Although
Very
I do
relatable
like
chapter.
the title of this chapter in the NRSVUE. I loathe my life.
That's literally the first line.
Yeah.
Job
Same, just-
10. I loathe my very life. Therefore I will give free rein to my complaint and speak out in the bitterness of my soul. I will say to God, do not condemn me, but tell me what charges you have against me. Does it please you to oppress me, to spurn the work of your hands, while you smile on the schemes of the wicked? Do you have eyes of flesh? Do you see as a mortal sees? Are your days like those of a mortal? Are your years like those of a man, that you must search out my faults and probe after my sin? Though you know that I am not guilty, and that no one can rescue me from your hand. Your hands shaped me and made me. Will you now turn and destroy me? Remember that you molded me like clay. Will you now turn me to dust again? Did you not pour me out like milk and curdle me like cheese, clothe me with skin and flesh and knit me together with bones and sinews? You gave me life and showed me kindness, and in your providence watched over my spirit. But this is what you concealed in your heart. And I know that this was in your mind. If I sinned, you would be watching me and would not let my offense go unpunished. If I am guilty, woe to me. Even if I am innocent, I cannot lift my head, for I am full of shame and drowned in my affliction. If I hold my head high, you stalk me like a lion, and again display your awesome power against me. You bring new witnesses against me and increase your anger toward me. Your forces come up against me wave upon wave. Why then did you bring me out of the womb? I wish I had died before any eye saw me. If only I had never come into being, or had been carried straight from the womb to the grave. Are not my few days almost over? Turn away from me so I can have a moment's joy before I go to the place of no return, to the land of gloom and deep shadow, to the land of deepest night and deep shadow and disorder, where even the light is like darkness.
So,
He's a fun
couple
guy.
Things. It seems like he totally gets that God is being an asshole. But he's always like, he's not condemning God in any way. He's just saying like, I don't deserve this. So he is saying the closest he can get to that without saying, hey God, fuck you. Although I do really like the and I'm gonna start saying it. Yeah, did you not pour me out like milk and curdle me like cheese? I'm gonna start using curdle me like cheese.
It's obviously not literal. It's referring to all sorts of dairy products.
Of course.
No, that was blessed are the cheesemakers. I think
I know, but this is well.
I mean,
but
We're
I mean,
from Wisconsin.
excuse me.
Some of
We
us
do
are
know
poured
what
out
it
like
refers
milk.
to, right?
Some of us are poured out like yogurt. Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's literally a commentator who called it milk-like substance. You probably know what
Have you
it
mentioned it
Yeah,
just
I mean,
before?
refers to.
Let's like as we have already discussed on this show, the Odes of Solomon.
Yes.
These people
Look.
knew how babies are made.
well, at least they had some idea. But yeah, the internal organs of a person are, the understanding of those were not particularly refined. Obviously, bones and sinew and muscle and various. I mean, I don't know. I've not dissected a person. I don't know what parts in the.
Well,
But the
they
idea of
didn't exactly know how babies were made. I mean, it's like what the Quran says. You know, that life is started by a clot of fluid.
I
It's
mean,
similar idea here, right? You poured me out
kind
like
of.
milk, so you have a liquid, and then it
Yep.
congeals
Yeah.
into
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
and then you clothed
Um,
that with skin and flesh,
yeah.
and then wove bones and sinews, which is I don't remember
Mhm.
what the Quran says and what the right way is.
I mean, it's if you consider that periods and then miscarriages, you'd have at least some visualization. However,
Yeah, but isn't there like a thing about how the Quran says like
yeah,
bones
the Quran
first
says
and
that
then and then flesh, and I think in real life it's the other way around.
it's a
something
clot
like
of blood, and yeah, that makes the semen and comes from the spine, and it's all kinds of weird stuff like that.
Between the backbone and the ribs.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's accurate if you put your head between your legs. Have you seen that?
Man.
Intellectual contortions, it just head straight up the ass.
Mm. Yeah. So this my commentary for this is just all quotations, but I plan like from 11 forward to try and summarize the commentaries because too much excessive quotes on Job. Okay. So on verse 1, Clines comments, quote, "The language of this announcement, establishing the tonality of the whole speech, is reminiscent of 7:11, which also led into the most radical and ironic challenge of God's intentions toward Job. In one point, however, Job's fresh decision to speak his mind is different. In 7:16 and 9:21, he had declared that he had rejected Ma'as life. Now he speaks of his life not as something he has decided against, but as something he abhors or loathes, in Hebrew, kot. The injection of the feeling of disgust, obscured by the tendency of our versions to translate ma'as and kot alike, may even be a positive sign, a token of a somewhat less nihilistic attitude. It will be some time before Job lapses again into his death wish, verses 18 through 22. Whatever the nuance, his loathing for his life is the necessary condition for his free utterance. Only a person who finds no joy in life would dare to speak as Job will of God. The announcement signals a deliberate heightening of the intensity."
Yeah, it's the wish to have never been born is something I have heard from several people in certain times in their life. Job is certainly not the only person to have made that declaration. Yeah. And I mean, it does give a bit of smite me, oh mighty smiter. Which incidentally I have tried and I have not yet been smote. So.
Okay, on 3, Habel comments, quote, "The accusation that God oppresses, ashak, is consistent with Job's earlier claims that the way God treats all humans, 7:1 and 2, and Job in particular, 7:3 and 20, for El to oppress is to belly his character as maker. Compare Proverbs 14:31 and Redeemer in Psalms 103:6. Under the general rubric of oppression, Job specifies 2 charges. El spurns his own creation and favors the case of the wicked. The charge that God spurns the labor of his hands, compare 14:15, refers first of all to humiliating human beings, compare 7:17 and 18, but may also embrace the destructive anger El exhibits toward the whole earth, in 9:5-7. The contention that El is immoral in his administration of justice and favors the wicked over the righteous was enunciated in Job's previous assessment of El's governance, in 9:23 and 24. The opening idiom, "is it good for you," in verse 3a, is equivocal and sarcastic. It can mean, is it your advantage, is it proper, or is it to your liking? The possibility that the one party or the other is benefiting from particular actions in this case is pursued by later speakers, compare 22:2 and 3 and 35:3. On verse 4, Seow comments, quote, Job asks sarcastically if God's vision is not all too human. The question may allude to Bildad's claim of God's destruction of someone or something because God did not see, 818b. To Job, though, it is only a human who can claim to be so short-sighted. The destruction of Job can hardly be regarded as a result of divine short-sightedness. This is not an excuse one might use for the all-seeing God, who is supposed to see Job as only God can see, in 7:8. God, not being limited by a human vision that can see only the external, should be able to see what is within a person, according to Kimchi. God should know Job's innocence, yet Job is treated as if he were guilty, as if God cannot see as God ought to see.
Yeah, God doesn't care about your innocence.
On verses 5 and 6, Clines comments, quote, The third question asks whether God has so limited an expectation of life, no more than a mere human's, that he feels himself under pressure of time to discover some fault in Job before he, i.e. God, is dead. The question is a reflex of Job's sense of the unrelenting pressure of God's persecution of him. Where his enemy a human, Job reflects, such impatient insistency could perhaps betray an overblown sense of the brevity of life. His opponent behaves like those whose desperate rush to get things done stems from their fear of approaching death, or more exactly, whose drive toward cruelty is a symptom of their fear of death, according to Terrien. Of course, Job would acknowledge that God's life is not so bounded, that he is from everlasting to everlasting, quote unquote, according to Psalms 92, and that his years have no end, quote unquote, Psalms 102:28, which is 27. Then such behavior, explicable and therefore excusable in a human being, is inexplicable in God, unless perhaps inexplicable. Thank you.
Explicable.
Are you struggling? I'm struggling.
I fucked it up. Unless perhaps in an unspeakably sinister manner. Yeah.
Well, that's true. I mean, literally, if you're God and you're immortal and you have all power and knowledge, then why the fuck are you acting like such a petty little bitch? Is a completely logically valid question to ask in this situation.
It's not the question that I object to. It's that you're a really bad reporter.
Yeah. God forbid reporters ask questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, 8 and 9. Seow comments, quote, Hand is the catchword linking verses 7 and 8, and it recalls as well the expression work of your own hands in verse 3. The ominous hand of God in verse 7, the hand from which the sufferer needs to be rescued, gives way to the creative hand of God in verse 8. Yet the creative hand turns out to be a destructive hand after all. The language in verse 8 recalls the image elsewhere of God as an artisan working with clay, as we see in Isaiah 45:9, 64:7, which is 8, and Jeremiah 18:6. The verb atzab, to fashion, is related to etzeb, a clay vessel, Jeremiah 22:28, as well as to otzeb and atzab, terms for clay images used as idols. This image, though, is subverted in the next line, for the maker also destroys. The verb bala, to destroy, recalls Bildad's description of the one who destroys the good plant in 8:18, and also God's own admission to destroying Job in 2:3. So the couplet in verse 8 suggests the freedom of the maker to create and to destroy, precisely the point Bildad proffered.
Well, and I've heard that from Christians my whole life, that, it isn't wrong if God murders us because he owns us and we're property, and we should be so lucky as to have the effrontery to exist, and that we should be grateful that he ever, deigned to permit us to exist, and that all of our existence is just a complete gift, and we should, feel that we are owed nothing by God.
So I need to just drink. Okay,
Did I
on
mention
10.
I hate
Sorry.
Christianity?
Say verse 9 is an example of something that if you can ask a literalist, like, is this verse literal? did God create Job from clay?
I mean, that is certainly believed, that the idea of God making people, but the from clay, and specifically, the idol form made out of clay, that definitely harkens back to
I mean,
the Adam creation.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's like it's obviously a metaphor. It's metaphorically applied to people because of Adam, but like. So it
Yeah,
has to be-
like clay, though. I mean, the molding like clay. That was another
true.
analogy the Christians use a lot, that God is molding you like clay. And shall the clay say to the potter, why did you make me this way? Because you have no right to have any opinion over your own existence or personhood, because you didn't make you. God did, so you're just going to do whatever he wants, and you're going to be grateful for it, or you're going to hell.
Yeah, I mean, Seow notes that the creation of humanity out of clay is a premise assumed in several texts from Mesopotamia and in Ugaritic literature.
You know how clay, when it's like on a wheel, and then you have to like form it, like to turn it into a bowl or whatever. So you know how like animals, humans are not all animals, but humans, our lineage descend from the ones that like go anus first. Is it deuterostoma?
Deuterostoma, yeah. Already, this is your...
So like when so God is like forming us out of clay with our butts up and he's
asshole
like...
first.
And then he comes out the other side.
Deuterostoma would mean what? Second mouth?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mouth second. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, your anus is not your second mouth.
No, the anus comes first. So we were all literally just an asshole once,
Yeah.
as you so eloquently put.
Thank you.
Though some people still are assholes.
Okay. Mouth second, or second mouth, is a better name for us than anus first. But
And what makes that funny is that development means that the very first thing we developed and the entirety of what we were in that moment, just an asshole.
Yeah.
I mean, if the shoe fits.
And some of us never grew out of it.
Okay, on 10 through 12, Hartley comments, quotes, Job heightens his complaint by recounting the marvelous way a baby is made. Conception is described by analogy to the production of cheese. Milk, i.e. semen, is poured, hetich, into the womb and curdled or congealed, hikape, into a substance like soft cheese, i.e. an embryo. Compare Psalms 139, 13-16, 2 Maccabees 7:22, and Wisdom 7:2. This soft mass receives form and structure when God clothes it with skin and flesh and knits together, sochech, bones and sinews. God grants this inanimate clump life, chayim, and loyal love, chesed. With the breath of life comes God's commitment of loyal love to his new creation. As in Psalm 63:4, English 3, in Old Testament 3, these two words emphasize both the bestowing of the life principle and the sustaining of that life. After God has breathed the breath of life into each person, he guards or protects that life principle or spirit, in Hebrew ruach, by his providence, pkudah, which means God's directing the course of events that befall a person. Since Job believes that he has proved faithful to God, he now calls on God to prove true to his commitment by guarding his life from a premature death.
And I mean, that's the trap. You remember that terrible, terrible sales line for Christianity. It's not a religion, it's a relationship. Yeah, I know. But it's a relationship where you can't actually rely on them for anything. And
even if it was a relationship, it would still be a religion.
Yes, that is true. But my point is just that in a relationship, you can actually rely on the other person for something. If it's a half decent relationship,
You can pose questions and get answers.
Yeah, there are reasonable expectations. Not here. You can't ask for anything. God is too important to listen to your shit.
I swear, whenever religious people say something like, "Oh, God doesn't want, religion to be complicated or anything," that's why like there's this simplistic form of this practice. I'm like, that the fact that you have that kind of practice at all means it's less simplistic than not having it. Like,
No,
Well,
that's not
one
because
thing
God is kind. It's because people are stupid.
one thing that's been confusing me is why the hell anybody goes to church. I'm lost at that.
Free wine.
Theater.
I've been to church a couple of times. At its best, it's awfully boring. And at any other time when it's not just boring, I'm irritated at the fact that some ignorant know nothing is lying to me.
Well, there's certain churches, sort of your stereotypical black evangelical churches in the South are at least good theater. And definitely lots of crowd participation with the being slain in the spirit, or what did they call it in the South? That's what we called it up here. But other stuff like that. At least they're having a good time. With regular church, it can be very dull. Some rituals can be dramatic in a sort of a deep and impactful way, if you like that. I don't know. Aside from that one priest who did that rave for the Vatican, that was actually kind of cool. But aside from that, yeah, it's mostly just a sense of obligation. They made you go as a kid. They told you were a bad person if you skipped too much, and they made analogies about how you would lose your faith if you
When
didn't.
you were a believer, you're sitting in the pew
Bored as fuck.
week
Yes.
after week, or sometimes multiple times a week,
Mm-hmm.
and you're listening to some ignorant know nothing assert baseless speculation and talk out of his ass.
Admittedly, I would very quickly move if the minister was just a completely ignorant know nothing. I tended to appreciate ministers who put thought into what they were saying and were more talking about, making analogies about your faith is not necessarily the same as asserting baseless speculation about like external reality. But yeah, there was a lot of boring shit, and God, I miss the days when my dad and I, if the sermon was boring, we would duck out early and go get coffee and talk about stuff. I fucking
Well, that
miss
sounds nice.
That was
So
actually really nice.
Just from now on, duck out for coffee.
Well, if we talked about God, then it sort of counted anyway, right? So, yeah, I miss that.
I want to know from believers. I feel like it would be fun to go to church with a believer and sit next to them and then critique the sermon that we just sat through. Why the fuck did we sit through all of this crap?
They're not allowed to admit to themselves how painfully boring it is. I certainly felt bad for noticing how painfully fucking boring it was. So I certainly would not be allowed to admit it, especially not to a non-believer. I would have to hype myself into pretending it was really enjoyable and then try to convince you of that, because there's an entire faith is a fucking parasite. It's not a priority.
Thank you for sharing that, because this was a sincere question, and I think you've answered it about as well as anyone could.
Thank you. Well, I glad my trauma could be informative. But yeah, they can't be honest, because you're trying to tell yourself what you need to believe so you don't have to deal with it, because it's so fucking hard.
Yeah, different communities handle like the, I don't know what you would call it, like the coming together section very differently, I think. Yeah, like when I see like a church service, like you said, it just looks so boring and stuff. Growing up, going to an Orthodox shul or synagogue, there was sometimes at one point there'll be like a little break, and the rabbi would get up and give like a little, I guess you could call it a sermon, but it wasn't like preaching. It's more of a explaining some concept or whatever that they were learning that week. And I would normally just leave. I mean, my dad would always let me go out, like for the speech or whatever. Like prayers by themselves are just like you kind of just read what it says in the book to yourself, and there's some bits where there's some singing or whatever, but like yeah, and then you normally have some sort of like reception afterwards, and there's a lot of people just talking to each other the whole time. So
Some of them do have really good potlucks.
For the people in the chat who were, as Lilith was,
mm.
sincere believers once upon a time, and went to church once or twice a week, or religiously, and I have a question. Did you ever do what I did the 2 times I went to church as a child, as a young child? Both times I had the same problem, realizing that the guy behind the podium is talking out of his ass, where he says either something that I know is not true, or he's saying things he cannot know to be true, and he's expressing it as if he knows. Did you ever have like an awakening moment where you realize that man's talking out of his ass? And then I'll just leave that question. I'll be checking the chat to see how it turns out.
I just remembered a story. When I was like 8, we had just moved and we went to a new church that we didn't end up going long term. But the pastor had said something. He was preaching on Ruth and Orpha, and he got some little fact wrong in the story. And because I'm me with my brain, I latched onto that, and it wasn't like earth shattering. It was just a misquote of some. And after the sermon, I said, "Actually, you said that it was this, but it was really this, that." And my mom was standing there like, "Oh God, Chelsea, don't do." But I was right. And he looked at me and said, "I don't know what it says in your Bible, little girl, but in my Bible." And my mom was like, "Yeah, you know what? She was right." And then we didn't end up going to that church, and I'm very glad we didn't.
Thank you for that. All right, I didn't mean to hold up the show, but that was a sincere question that I've had for a long time.
Valid.
Yeah, I'm seeing comments though.
Okay. Let me jump on those. Okay, so Ferdhausen says, "My last church was all hellfire and brimstone. Jesus was to return on January 1st, 2000. So tonight we're going to party like..." Never mind. And here we are. Attended 10 years and questioned it for 8.
Oh, and did you read the comment by Jamie Wells? I haven't followed.
I love the idea that Jesus knows what January 1st
Yes,
is.
I did. Yes, I did, Tomer.
Ah, okay. Okay.
It was a compliment to Tomer, and he didn't catch it when I read it, so I apologize.
No, sorry, I was blanking out. Though I will say that I started recording a new song, old new song, but I want to polish it. I need to finish the lyrics, but I'll polish it on Discord someday when I finish.
Sounds fun.
Yeah. Okay. On 13 through 14, Habel comments, quote, "Hidden behind his maker's apparent care and providential lay the spy and detect human flaws. Thus, Job explores a new aspect of the surveillance theme developed in chapter 7. According to Job, the true nature of God's watching, shamar, in verse 14a, is not at first evident to mortals. Their maker leads them to believe that he is watching over their lives to bless and protect them, but in reality he has a sinister plan to discover their wrongs, which he allows to stand as black marks against them. Job is not admitting any guilt, as we see in verse 14b, but claiming that God permits victims to suffer under their guilt, whether apparent or real. What Job knows to be the case with you, quote-unquote, in the way God operates, stands in contrast with what Job knows is not the case with me, quote-unquote, 935. Job knows that God plays his devious games as he wills. Job, however, knows of no way to prove himself and the truth of his conviction." On 14 and 16, Seow comments, quote, The background of the metaphor here may be the ancient Near Eastern royal lion hunts common in Egypt and Mesopotamia, the killing of lions being a sign of the king's power over the most ferocious of creatures. In ancient Near Eastern iconography, therefore, the motif of the king smiting the heads of the enemy came to be replaced by that of the king smiting the lion. Such depictions, invariably propagandistic, suggest the king's marvelous power over the king of the beasts. So the parallel line speaks of God's extreme act. If Job, one of the lions of Eliphaz's imagination in 4, 10, and 11, ever ventures to stick his head out instead of remaining docile, God would hunt him just to show divine supremacy. As in the lion hunts elsewhere in the ancient Near East, notably in Mesopotamia, the treatment of Job appears to be a spectacle of divine power.
Yeah, so basically, because I said so, and I brought you into this world, I can take you out. Great parenting.
Not the first time I've heard that today. Not the first time I've heard that on this show.
True.
18 and 19, Clines comments, quote, "The lament takes up the theme of the middle section of Job's cry in chapter 3, verses 11 through 19, where also with the introductory why that marks off the reproach of or appeal, he voiced his vain wish that he could have been stillborn, not brought forth from the womb, quote-unquote, alive. Here, the not in chapter 3, he ascribes his birth to God's personal activity. This is a natural development of the thought of chapter 3, in line now with the exposition of verses 8 through 12. But it also signals how far Job has moved since chapter 3. There, God was mentioned only in the passive voice, and none of Job's hurt was laid to God's account. Here, the self-curse has become a reproach directed at God, and his unwished-for existence has become but the outworking of the perverse divine plan. Verses 13 and 14. And here Job's anguish arises not simply from his calamity and suffering, as in chapter 3, but from the consciousness that has now developed in him that the suffering is no accident, but the long-standing grisly design of God.
Divine plan. Yeah, I mean, it's almost Calvinistic. It's quite Calvinistic, actually. The idea that if God made me with the intent of my life, then he literally made me just to put me right here in this moment and torture me like a bastard for no fucking reason. And logically, yeah. I mean, Calvinism is fucking evil, but it's logically more coherent than many other theological positions.
And finally, 20 through 22, Hartley comments, quote, "Given the impossibility of his wish, Job pleads that God grant him some relief in his few remaining days. If he is to find some repose, it must come from God, not from within himself. Thus he entreats God, quote, 'Leave me alone that I may smile,' and quote, 'Hivlig,' before descending to the dark abyss of Sheol. In 927, Job considered the possibility of facing his dilemma with new courage and a smile, but he abandoned that idea as futile. Nevertheless, his longing for the repose that will allow him to smile once again continues unabated. If God would leave him alone, he could smile again, for he would have a short time of pleasantness before descending to Sheol. His melancholy words, 'I go never to return,' allude to the name for the abode of the dead, the land of no return, compare 7:10. Once a person enters this realm, there is no possibility of returning to earth. Therefore, Job knows that if he is to find any relief, it must be in this life." Yeah,
And we
the
will
Christians-
see time warp again.
Yeah, I see you translated the Avliga as I will smile. Or...
Yeah, that's Hartley's translation.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I mean JPS has like be diverted. Leave me alone. Let me be diverted a while.
Yes, let me leave it a while. Yeah.
Yeah, and Steinsaltz has like compose myself or rest.
Yeah. Right.
Basically, it's like
cheer-
it feels like he has God's boot on his neck, and like I'll never be like, just leave me alone, and maybe I could find a moment's peace before I die.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Seow renders it, I may cheer up a little. And let's see, Habel.
I mean, a moment's peace sounds like a good English translation of the expression, I guess.
When I want to see Habel. Yeah, Habel also renders, leave me and let me smile a little.
Okay.
Yeah. So the ancient Christians, let's see.
This is
So,
gonna be bad.
Where was I? Yes. Ephraim said that the words of Job in this chapter contain a prophetic hint of Christ's sacrifice.
They always say that shit.
It's obviously
Yeah.
the lions, right?
He
Being
says-
preyed on by
Yeah.
lion. Because
says
that's what
he-
it says about Jesus.
No, he says, here Job foreshadows the incarnation, verses 10 through 12. Here Job foreshadows the incarnation of the divine word through the assumption of human nature. These words, in fact, appear to be addressed to the Father as if they were said by the person, i.e. the Son, of the Lord.
Oh my god.
Yes.
Right.
It's like he didn't say it, but he could have said it. Fucking.
Yeah.
I was making a joke because there's like a phrase in Isaiah, I think, where it says like you surrounded me like lions or something.
Oh
Isn't it?
yeah, wasn't that the 22 that we had that whole talk about? Because that one guy said
I'm
Psalm
pretty sure that was
22
a psalm,
exists.
wasn't it?
Yeah,
Oh, is it a psalm?
strong bulls
Oh.
of Bashan. Yeah, that one.
It might have
No,
been
no,
like
no,
something
it-
from the suffering.
No,
servant.
the Hebrew says like ka'ari, but then the Greeks kind of translated it as pierced.
Yeah, that's a psalm. I think it's
That's a
22.
psalm. Oh, okay.
I don't know. We'll get to it eventually.
Somebody's having an antivirus alarm. And Didymus said that, so even in the embryo, the soul is being clothed with skin and flesh and knit together with bones and sinews. Didymus sees in this passage an attestation of the priority of the soul to the body.
Oh my god.
Yeah,
What is he saying that the soul is
that the priority of the soul to the body.
priority?
So there is a footnote here. Didymus, who was a faithful follower of Origen, agreed with some of his heretical ideas.
Wait, when you say priority, do you mean like that the soul is there first and then God puts on like a fleshy
I think
suit
so.
on top?
Yes, I think
Ah,
so.
okay.
I think so. If not that, then definitely that the soul is more important than the body. But
don't
no,
you
no,
have the body first, and then when you're born, you breathe in the breath of life, and then you are infused with the living spirit?
Oh God, I need to read this to you because it's fun.
that
Okay.
depends on whether or not you want to have women have the option to have an abortion.
Oh God. Okay, so this is what he.
I mean, I
sorry.
mean, in the Kabbalah, there's like different types of souls, so maybe like there's the nefesh and the neshama. Like one is breathed in when you're born, and the other one is like this living spark or whatever that all animals have.
Okay, so this is what Didymus says. So the seed from which life emerges, he calls milked milk, quote unquote. For as milk curdles and becomes cheese, so the seed becomes nature, quote unquote, when it curdles. This is a condition before the embryo. For the seed that sinks into the channels of the vagina becomes nature when it curdles like cheese. This
Nature,
formation is
as in
my
like,
God.
as in like,
nature, quote unquote.
as in like natural yogurt, like. like, what,
Wait,
what do you mean by
this-
You guys are
nature?
making me never
Yeah,
want to
I
have
don't know
sex
what-
with a man ever again.
Hey, if it makes
I
you
have
feel
no
any better,
idea.
neither do I.
What are they? I think what they're saying is that the
Me
woman
too,
is,
and I don't like cheese.
the woman is a
Mm.
receptacle, i.e. the yogurt cup in this idea, and then we have the liquid, and then we have the yeast, and then that's where babies come from.
Yeah.
This show's
It's
crazy, y'all.
natured.
I'm gonna go get some gravel in a minute, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. That's. Yes. We're in 10, right? 11. Sorry, 11. Now we're
Okay.
in 11.
So, who's reading this one?
I think it's you, right?
Yep.
It's you.
It's
It's
Um,
you.
the way you put that.
I need some ginger ale.
I thought you were going to say I need some gin.
I mean, yeah. Well, it's like only what 10 a.m. here. No, it's 11.
I'm on my second beer. So.
Yeah.
You should be dead by
It's
now.
noon somewhere.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere, I suppose.
Yeah. When then Zophar the Naamite answered, "Should a multitude of words go unanswered? And should one full of talk be vindicated? Should your babble put others to silence? And when you mock, shall no one shame you? For you say, my conduct is pure, and I am clean in God's sight. But oh, that God would speak and open his lips to you, and that he would tell you the secrets of wisdom. For wisdom is many-sided. Know then that God exacts of you less than your guilt deserves. Can you find out the deep things of God? Can you find out the limit of the Almighty? It is higher than heaven. What can you do? Deeper than Sheol. What can you know? Its measure is longer than the earth and broader than the sea. If he passes through and imprisons and assembles for judgment, who can hinder him? For he knows those who are worthless, and he sees iniquity. When he sees iniquity, would he not consider it? But the stupid will get understanding when a wild ass is born human. Can't wait for Tomir's comment on that one. If you direct your heart rightly, you will stretch out your hands toward him. If iniquity is in your hand, put it back in your pants. Put it far away. And do not let wickedness reside in your tents. Surely, then, you will lift up your face without blemish. You will be secure and will not fear. You will forget your misery. You will remember it as waters that have passed away, and your life will be brighter than the noonday. Its darkness will be like morning. And you will have confidence because there is hope. You will be protected and take your rest in safety. You will lie down and no one will make you afraid. Many will entreat your favor, but the eyes of the wicked will fail. All way of escape will be lost to them, and their hope is to breathe their last. I am philosophically opposed to that whole chapter.
Yeah. Well, on the bright side, this is one of the ones who did not speak truly of God, and who God criticizes for what he said.
I
But
mean,
yeah,
his whole shtick is like, well, I mean, you shouldn't really complain because God is, he's all knowing and all powerful. Like, what do you have? Like, you can't criticize God. Like, who
Yeah,
are you to
but
criticize?
even if
mere
God
peon.
exists and is all powerful, that doesn't make him right. That just
Right,
means he has the
yes.
bigger stick.
Yes, I get that. But to them, I guess might makes right. Although I do want to say on verse 12 there, but the stupid will get understanding when a wild ass is born human. Is that kind of like when pigs fly sort of thing?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, what I like is when the speaker here is talking about the breadth and limits of God, right? Broader than the sea and all that. What can you know? Why don't we turn that back? How do you know that God is broader than the sea? How do you know that God is deeper than Sheol? How do you know that there is a Sheol? How do you know that there's a God? How do we know that you're not just talking out of your ass?
Humans have been talking out of their ass for a long time.
I should note. So Seow has a bit of a history of consequences for Zophar. He notes that following the interpretation of Targum in verses 17 and 18, medieval Jewish interpreters understood Zophar to be affirming the doctrine of bodily resurrection, a doctrine they thought Job denied in 7:9, 12, 14, 14, and 14 verses 12 and 14. They took Zophar to be arguing that the meaning of suffering is unknowable. For Maimonides, Zophar's theology is like that of the Asharite philosophers of Islam, who viewed suffering as due simply to God's free will. Thus, Zophar is seen as making a legitimate, even if not entirely satisfactory, theological contribution to the discussion. But Zophar was a positive figure to some Christian interpreters as well. Clement of Rome, for example, found Zophar's injunction against loquaciousness in verses 2 and 3 to be instructive for the Corinthians who were caught up in congregational quarrels. To Clement, Zophar warned against slander, as we see in 1 Clement 30:4-8, a point Christians should heed. For the most part, however, early Christian interpreters tried to defend Job against Zophar, who, like the other friends, was associated with false teachers. These interpreters thought Zophar fabricated charges against the holy Job, since Zophar's alleged quotes of Job in verse 4 cannot be found anywhere in his previous speeches. No.
A comment has inspired me to make up a new word that I think I'm going to use in my counter apologetics. Ventriloquatulism.
Very nice.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll start with verse 1. Zophar the Naamathite. Hartley notes that many considered Zophar to be the youngest of Job's friends, without any evidence to back it up. He writes, however, that Zophar bears the least status, since he delivers only 2 speeches. But nevertheless, his speech is the most poignant, offering Job little comfort, except for, quote, the elaborate picture of the repentant sinner's peaceful security, end quote. In Zophar's view, people are believers of God or arrogant sinners, and that it is unlikely that Job was righteous and free from wrong. He reasons that Job's present punishment is only partial, tempered by God's mercy.
Yeah, if you can bring yourself to the point where you believe it's all your fault and overcome both your reason and your dignity and internal sense of truth, you can reach a point of emotional and mental surrender that is cathartic in an extremely fucked up way. Kind of like really unhealthy BDSM.
Yes.
It's fucked. God is fucked. Everything about God is fucked. Fuck these people.
No. On 2 through 4, Seow notes that Zophar views his rhetorical questions much like Bildad, 8:2 through 3. His viewpoint is consistent with wisdom tradition that verbosity is a mark of folly, as we see in Proverbs 10 verses 8, 14, and 19. He writes that Zophar is compelled to respond to Job in accordance with the proverbial counsel to answer the fool, lest the fool think himself wise. Proverbs 26:5. To Zophar, Job's self-delusional folly is evident in his excessive words, perhaps his many self-justifications, as we see in 9 verses 2, 15, and 20, and 10, 15. To Zophar, much talk does not put one in the right, quote-unquote, which ironically echo Job's own words in 9 verses 15 and 20. Zophar regards Job's words as babblings, quote-unquote, in Hebrew, badecha, a term implying both noise and deceit, meant to silence the opposition. Job wishes to intimidate using his verbosity, eloquence, and mockery. However, although Job has accused God of mockery, it is he himself who mocks. He seems to get away with it, since there has been none to expose him, machlim, to uncover his true intentions. Zophar hears Job's words not as a protest, but as rhetoric, part of the smooth talk from a skilled orator. Job has imagined purifying himself with a cleanser, as we see in 9:30, but such a cleanser would do no good, since God would put him through hell again and make him look unclean, in 9:31. Since Job is suffering, he'll appear to others to be a sinner, even though he had really been clean. And Seow writes, quote, Zophar infers that Job is denying culpability, for Job seems to see his uncleanness as entirely God's doing. Job did not say to whom he would look clean or unclean, although he probably meant anyone who looks upon him. Zophar, however, takes Job to mean cleanness in the eyes of God.
I mean, in fairness, Job is at this point sitting in rags in a dung heap, covered in vile sores, and apparently scraping himself with a potsherd. So physically, he is supposed to look quite repulsive, and that is not divorced in the conceptions of those time and those people from the idea of him being spiritually unclean and corrupted. You know, the physical suffering and the spiritual uncleanliness, these are very hand in glove in that conception.
Yeah. On verses 5 and 6, Habel writes that wisdom in Job may refer to, quote, the primordial principle guiding God in his creation and organization of the cosmos, as we see in 59, and compare Proverbs 8:22 and 30, end quote. This hidden principle is inaccessible to humans, as we see in 28:12 forward, and is one of the primary tools God employs to govern society and nature. Humans which possess wisdom have a deep understanding of the meaning of life and appreciate God's mysterious ways, as we see in 4:21, 13:5, 17:10, etc. Tzofar views wisdom as secret, in Hebrew ta'alumot, i.e. hidden dimensions, quote-unquote, which humans cannot perceive. Both wisdom and understanding have a deeper layer, known only to God, and perhaps to those like Tzofar, who are initiated in the esoteric ways of wisdom. Since Tushia also suggests practical success, Tzofar accuses Job for arguing from the obvious, and not discerning the deeper dimensions of God's wisdom. He argues that if Job was God, he would have understood the meaning of his suffering.
So if you were omniscient, you would know what was going on. Great point.
On 7 through 9, Clines argues that Tzofar isn't preaching a doctrine of God's omniscience, quote-unquote. Rather, God's wisdom surpasses human knowledge. Humans cannot achieve full knowledge of God's wisdom and cannot know, quote-unquote, God's wisdom in its entirety. In the book of Job, knowledge is often associated with power and is a practical know-how, quote-unquote. He writes that it is also untrue that Tzofar affirms that God is unknowable. Although Terian argued that Tzofar enunciates a general truth, which he then proceeds to contradict in his application of it, Clines writes that Tzofar's awareness of God's ultimate mystery does not stop Tzofar from teaching what he believes to be God's ways, especially how he acts towards wrongdoers. Tzofar is not claiming that God's essence is incomprehensible, but rather that God's wisdom is beyond human reach.
Seems a bit 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, doesn't it?
Okay, 10 and 11, Hartley writes that while God's presence reaches beyond the universe, he leaves these realms to enforce justice on earth. He writes, quote, God passes by, detects that somebody is doing wrong, and imprisons. Afterward, he summons the assembly to sit as a court in order to execute a just sentence, as we see in Ezekiel 16:40, 23, 46, and 47, Proverbs 5:14, end quote. God knows false men, quote unquote. The Hebrew for knows, in Hebrew yada, means both that God sees their wrongdoing and that he executes judgment upon them. Using this, Tzofar denounces Job's thought that God acts arbitrarily, or that he should be restrained and held accountable. He rejects the description of God's acting as a possible explanation of Job's plight. Rather, he insists that God's actions are always just, and Job's affliction must be a punishment for some hidden sin. Since God knows false men, he cannot have erred in judging Job. On verse 12, Habel describes the proverb, quote, as enigmatic as the enigma it relates, end quote. He writes that the hollow human, nabuv, seems to be the empty-headed fool, and that the word nabuv was chosen because of its association with the root lebav, to become wise. Thus, the relation between the first line of the proverb and the second is problematic. Pope argued that there is an analogy between a fool becoming wise and a wild ass becoming domesticated, and renders when a wild ass is born tame. Habel, however, writes that no explicit allusion to this figure seems intended, in spite of the association of wild ass, pere, with human or man, Adam, which recalls Ishmael's designation as wild ass of a man in Genesis 16:12. Instead, he writes that if we acknowledge that Sophar has been dealing with impossible tasks in the preceding verses, such as discovering God's mystery, then this proverb belongs to the same category. He writes, quote, "The metamorphosis of an addle-brained fool, like Job, into a wise man would be as impossible as the birth of a human to a wild ass. The hidden satirical allusion of this proverb is the wild ass, quote unquote. According to Zophar, Job is a wild ass, and thus will never have the intelligence of a human being."
Yes. He's upset because his life is being destroyed for no reason. Clearly, he's an ass.
And I am not reading this the way, as usual, I'm not reading this the way any of your cited interpreters do. Tomer, when you read it in Hebrew, what does it say to you?
Well, it's difficult. That's the problem.
Yeah.
I mean,
Wow,
if
now
it was-
Tomer
Tomer can't read Hebrew. Wow.
I mean, Thomas is using like more critical modern scholarship, right? I mean, JPS I think translates quite similar to how you were saying it. I think so. A hollow man will get understanding when a wild ass is born a man.
Yeah,
So
I mean
it's
the
like,
Hebrew.
like you said, like when pigs
I
fly.
like the way Loritz first interpreted it because that was the way I read it.
Mm-hmm. Sort of a when pigs fly.
Yeah, the Hebrew here is ve'ish navuv yilabev. Sorry.
Sorry, I was just gonna say it does say in the notes here that the Hebrew is uncertain.
Yes. So the Hebrew is ve'ish navub yilavev ve'ayir pere adam yivaled. So and a man who is hollow will yelavev, meaning, I mean yelavev is the difficult levav, like will have understanding, or like levav literally is like double heart or something like that.
Yeah, like take heart.
Yes, take heart. And ayir I think it's is a donkey, right? A female.
Or an
The
ass.
colts,
Yeah.
like the young of a donkey.
Yeah.
And
Ayir
Pera
pere-
is a wild donkey, as
Yeah.
opposed to a domesticated donkey.
Yeah.
Steinsaltz has an interesting interpretation. So he adds words in between the translation. He's like, but a hollow man can take heart. And he's like, in contrast to God, man is an empty receptacle, therefore his heart can be filled with understanding. As a colt of an onager, or wild ass, can be born a man. When a person is born, he is like the colt of a wild ass, and then he must grow and develop into a man. So he's saying like humans have the capability of gaining knowledge. God already has everything.
Yeah.
I think that's what he's trying to say. At least that's how Steinsaltz translates it.
There is one version of Toggle which reads, "And will an argumentative human being be exact, and an obstinate young man who is rebuked become a great man?"
Okay. So they just
mean-
take the words for like a young colt or a young
Yeah.
donkey as just like an expression of a young man. Okay.
Yeah, though it should be noted that Seow notes that there is a consensus among modern critics that the text must be corrupt in some way, with many arguing that Ayir and Pere are conflated variants. After all, the text has Ayir Pere, the two nouns being in apposition, an ass, a wild ass, not Pere, an ass of the wild ass. Yeah, so...
Also, Pere Odom, or Pere Adam, is an expression in, I don't know if it's it's a Hebrew expression. I don't know exactly if it's Talmudic or whatever, but it refers to like a person who is like wild or whatever.
And
I don't know.
foolish?
I don't. No, I think it's more just like. I mean, it literally means like a wild ass of a man. So I guess it's
So like Ishmael.
Yes.
yeah. So it's like an expression that people use, like a para-adam, is a wild young person sort of thing.
Okay, where was I?
Yeah, I remember my 20s.
Okay, on 14, Seow comments, quote, In 6:29 and 30, Job had insisted that his friends refrain and not let malice come, for he was sure he was in the right and had spoken no malice, quote unquote. Now Zophar tells Job not just to remove trouble, but also not to permit malice to dwell in his tent. To Zophar, though, malice is not just something on one's tongue. It is not just a matter of taste. No, it is far more nefarious. Zophar personifies malice as someone to whom one may provide hospitality, someone with whom one may associate as with a guest in one's abode. Zophar avers that malice must not be accorded to hospitality, just as trouble must be removed, literally, made to be far away. The pairing of rachak, to be far, hef'il, to remove, and shachen, to dwell, shakan, to dwell, is noteworthy, since the pair is used elsewhere of the removal, rachak, of apostasy on the one hand, and the dwelling, shachen, of God on the other, Ezekiel 43:9. The removal of sin is a prerequisite for the dwelling of the deity. Zophar stands in this tradition, for he insists that wrong must be removed and not be allowed to dwell in one's tent.
That is interesting. I mean, I understand the idea of personifying virtues and vices, and do you encourage a grudge or positive thinking or whatever? That's a metaphor that's been used for a long time, but there is also, I think, a far more physical, practical element to this. Think about when Jacob left his father-in-law and Rachel was hiding idols in her tent, and they were calling down curses on anyone who should have the idols and whatever, because it was you were bringing a forbidden thing and stealing it and yada yada yada. Like, I think they genuinely believed that if you had an evil object or an object associated with some unclean practice in your tent, even if you didn't know it, that could reasonably call down the wrath of God, because you have the cursed item. I mean, there are still people who believe it today, the crazy, crazy ladies who think that, everything is witchcraft.
I thought that story was just that she stole it, her father wanted them back, and then because Jacob didn't know that...
he didn't know. But there
he
was
didn't know,
still...
so he just cursed the person who happened to have it. So it wasn't necessarily... It doesn't seem necessarily a problem that she had them. The problem is just that she got cursed by the holy man.
Unknowing, because he never found out who had it. It was always a bit of an odd story. I felt like there was some cultural context missing.
And it must be quite late story, because when you go to like David, he had, I think the same word is used, like he had one in his house, the little statues or whatever, and it doesn't seem to imply that that's a bad thing.
I mean, idol worship was used in Proto-Judaism. They just had to pretend afterwards that it had never been, but it was definitely part of it.
Okay, on 16, Clines writes that Zophar explains to Job that he will remember his suffering, quote unquote, amal, both physical and mental, as only a harmless memory. He won't forget it in the sense of losing it completely from his memory, but rather that it no longer has any power of affecting him. He notes that there is a close parallel in Genesis 41:51, where Joseph names his firstborn Manasseh, God causes to forget, explaining that God caused Joseph to forget all his suffering, in Hebrew amal, and all his father's house. Joseph also remembers by having a child named Forgetting, quote unquote. Clines writes that the parallelism between forget and remember is a striking confirmation of a psychological truth. Quote, pain that has been thoroughly worked through is not totally forgotten, as it might be if it were merely repressed, but is remembered as powerless, end quote. On 18 and 19, Hartley writes that according to Zophar, Job will have inner peace in his new life and have a strong sense of security because he will have genuine hope. Zophar argues that instead of dreading for what's to come, Job will look forward to it confidently, as if he was a sheep lying peacefully in a pasture guarded by a shepherd. This is in contrast with Job saying that God is hunting him like a lion in 10:16. When Job has peace with God, many will court his favor. The Hebrew chilu panecha is usually translated to appease or entreat the favor of, meaning literally either to make the face smooth through stroking or to sweeten the face. Humans may be the subject of this action, as we see in Proverbs 19:6 and Psalms 45:13, but it is most often God, and in such passages, it is associated with words of earnest, contrite petitioning, as we see in 1 Kings 13:6, 2 Chronicles 30-12, Zechariah 8:21 and 22. Thus, quote, entreaty in one way an inferior party seeks to win the favor of his superior. This language then means that Job will again stand at the head of his community and be accorded the highest honor, end quote.
The number of times that this was the subtext in faith. The number of times that the subtext was, if you just admit it's all your fault and grovel appropriately, then you will receive the blessing, which is always unspecific. But then all will be right. You just have to pray harder, believe harder, give more of yourself to God, etc., 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 etc. It's just, fuck.
Can I just say that in my experience, my face isn't very smooth after stroking.
This notion of giving more of yourself to God is bothersome to me, because it's just give yourself over to a delusion.
Yes.
Just submit to delusion and then live in a fantasy.
Yes, but you're not allowed to admit to yourself that it's delusion. These things are put into your mind, these mechanisms, when you're very young, or if they catch you in a vulnerable state, maybe someone you love died and your life is in chaos, they can sometimes implant it then. But usually it's when you're a child with no critical thinking. You basically, these are mechanisms that are self-perpetuating. They put triggers in, like the ideology puts triggers in you that you cannot think certain things. It took me the longest time to actually be able to conceptualize the idea that God might not exist, because I could think of such a thing occur, but I genuinely couldn't believe that it was possible for years and years, even just to hypothetically, no, I couldn't do it. And that's what I think a lot of people who are dealing with reason and logic and these things, and yeah, you're right, the reason and the logic is not there, but there's also a psychological element. And it's, there was the comment of the God virus and God, religion being a virus. I don't think it's a virus. I think it's a parasite. It takes over the host, consumes part of the mind for its own purposes, and sometimes it'll do things for the benefit of the host because it benefits, and other times it will kill the host if that is what will spread it. Whether it's the little ant climbing up the, thing and getting eaten by a sheep, or the mouse running and getting eaten by the cat, or the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church.
Yeah, I see that.
And finally, on 20, Seow comments, quote, hope, though, is conditional. It depends on Job's response. Job had bitterly concluded that God finishes the blameless and the wicked alike in 9:22. But Sophar argues that only the wicked are finished. Their eyes will fail, quote unquote, according to good. The failing of eyes is an idiom for longing disappointedly for loved ones, as we see in Deuteronomy 28:32 and 1 Samuel 2:33, for deliverance, as we see in Lamentations 4:14, Psalms 119, 1-3, for food in Jeremiah 69, or for God and the fulfillment of God's promises, Psalms 69:4, which is 3, and 119:82. The wicked will hope, but they will not have their hope realized. And possibly, any possibility of escape will dissipate, and the only hope, quote unquote, in the sense of what one expects, kava, is their final expiration. And with this talk of expiration, the poem dramatically comes to an end.
And it all ends in death.
Yes, so the Christians. So, in their interpretation of Zophar's speech, the fathers noticed that an unjustified and reproachful attitude toward Job, At the same time, they are able to take the words of Job's friends as a starting point for moral reflections about the power, justice, and benevolence of God, and about the limits of the human mind to grasp divine truths. Therefore, Zophar appears to be a false accuser and a man full of resentment, according to Julian, Chrysostom, Didymus, and Hesychius. But at the same time, his words contain some truth that can be used for the moral instruction of the faithful, according to Chrysostom, Gregory, and Ephraim. The secret works of supreme wisdom are when God forsakes those whom he has created, enlightening them yet by permitting temptation of the flesh. When one is at the same time being enlightened by contemplations uplifting and obscured by the pressure of temptation, the soul then strains forward all the more to see what it should desire, according to Gregory. The fathers view the second part of Zophar's speech in an extremely unfavorable light. They perceived his insincerity, according to Olympiodorus, ignorance, according to Didymus and Chrysostom, and hypocrisy, according to Gregory. Only Ishodad reads in Zophar's words an announcement of Job's forthcoming liberation from his affliction. Zophar wrongly and incessantly repeats that Job's faults have caused his misfortunes, according to Chrysostom. Moral virtue must correspond to purity of soul, according to Didymus. Whoever is rooted in the desire of eternity alone is neither uplifted by good fortune nor shaken by adverse fortune. Yeah.
Sure, Jan.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Are we going to move on to the next one?
We are not.
We are
I
not.
have to get the things.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
Have
we're not meeting this Saturday. Is that correct?
Yes.
Not this other day.
Okay.
I have a thing to attend to.
He's got a
Okay,
Snake
and-
Appreciation Day.
Mm.
And when next then?
That is the question. Next week, I mean, obviously we could go just all next Saturday, a week and a half, but I wouldn't mind doing something in the middle of the week.
Wednesday again?
I could do Wednesday again.
I'd have to change one of my appointments.
Oh,
but...
I think sorry. I think Wednesday's problematic for me. No, sorry.
Yeah.
What?
I was gonna say, it's Tuesday better.
Wednesday is problematic for me. Yeah.
Is Tuesday better?
Tuesday
I
would
think
be better
Tuesday.
for me.
I
Tuesday.
could do Tuesday.
All right. So we will move on to what is it?
I have to
12?
Arn, I have to check with Natalia Reagan first because we're starting doing shows again next week, so I don't know which day.
Okay. All right. Well,
But
get back to me on that as soon as you can, and
I will.
unless otherwise directed, I'll set it up for Tuesday.
For next Tuesday. All right. I look forward to seeing you all again then.
Okay. And with nothing else to say,
Oh, definitely go and join the Discord and go and subscribe to the Behold Network. I'm trying to get my groove back. I really am. I've just been in a real slump recently. Because I have stuff written. I need to rewrite some of it. But yeah, it's been hard to concentrate and do stuff. But I'm really trying to get my groove back. So because like
We
I
believe in you, Lawrence.
I have projects, I have ideas. I just gotta fucking do it. So I
I
gotta
hear
watch
that.
that Keanu. Was that who was that? Was that no, Shia LaBeouf. Shia LaBeouf, not Keanu Reeves. It was Shia LaBeouf. So yeah, I'll have to watch that video again, and maybe it'll give me the motivation I need.
Just do it.
Yeah, just do it.
Okay. Yeah, so it's not the one with Shia LaBeouf stalking you and the song.
No, not that one. That one's
Not
pretty
that
good,
one.
though.
Well, I mean, if you wanted a fear motivation, I mean,
Yeah.
I would be scared. Ah. All right. Love you all. Mwah.
hasta la bye-bye.
Fuck all of you.